What did God get right?
He made us perfectly.
How did that work if, like, we did something wrong? Like, did Adam and Eve do something
We
wrong?
did something wrong, but God made us with the ability to do whatever we want because He didn't want us to. He didn't want to control us. He gave us free will, and us with free will.
That was a mistake, right? Because, like, if He had made us actually perfect, even with free will, I'd say, then we would have been perfect in choosing the perfect choice, which would be not to eat the fruit, right?
Yeah, but I don't think you're right with that because then we wouldn't have free will. If we couldn't do wrong, then it won't be free will.
Well, does God have free will?
Yes.
Can God do wrong?
No.
Okay, perfect. So we could be like God in that sense. By the way, the book lies and says that we were made in His image, but obviously we weren't, because then we would have free will and be perfect.
Look, you cannot compare a human to God. That's ridiculous.
He did that. It wasn't me. He said, I've made that, let's make them in our image. That was Him.
Just because He's made in His image doesn't mean we are God.
Well, in that way we can compare, because He says, now they are like us, knowing good and evil. He's comparing us to them. That's not me. I didn't do that. I would never be blasphemous like that. I would say that, like, we're nothing like God. He's a complete piece of shit fuckface, and I'm so much nicer.
You're saying God does have free will, and God is not doing evil.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we have free will and can't do evil as well. We're not God. We do evil. We're humans.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, like, we could have been made perfect and unable to do the bad thing and have free will. If, like, God would have to make us more like Him. That's all.
I mean, this could be a whole argument to, like, morals. I mean, we can, like, take this any way you want, but I think that personally, we cannot be exactly like God. We are not perfect like God. God is.
No, I know we can't be exactly like God, but if God just made us perfect and so perfect that we wouldn't do the bad thing, we could still have free will and just never do the bad thing. Why not?
Because then we would not have a choice to be with God. See,
no, we would always choose to be with Him because we only do the good things because we're perfect. No, we're just perfect. We're perfect like God.
It would be forced in that sense.
I don't know. Like, I would just say, is it the right choice?
It would be the right choice, but it would be a forced choice, not a choice that
I don't think it would be. It would be the automatic choice for something that's perfect, made perfect, right?
No, because if I made you, let's say, like, hypothetically I made you, right? And I made you perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that the qualifications for you to make it into heaven, right, was to, like, be perfect, and perfect in this sense, in the biblical form, would be knowing God, knowing Jesus, being a full-fledged Christian, perfect Christian. And if I made you that way, you would have no choice to do anything else.
Yeah, well, but that's a good thing, I guess, because we would be perfect and we would choose the good thing, and then God would love us, and we would be in heaven with Him. There's really no downside to that.
Would it be true love if I kidnapped you and then said, if you do not, like, say I kidnapped you and I was like, you have to have true love for me, right? But I kidnapped you and had like a pew to your head, right? You would, of course, you would be forced to say yes, or you would just be unalive.
You're right. I think that it would be, you can't really have true love if there is a threat. Or I would even say, like, if you came to me and you were like, hey, Joel, I will love you. I love you and I want you to love me, so I will give you $1 million every year to love me. I would be like, okay, yes, I'll do it, but could you really trust that I loved you?
No.
No, so it's like when you coerce someone, either through threats or like gifting, that just like kind of negates the whole concept of love, don't you think?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's just what the dichotomy of heaven and hell is. You've just debunked the Christian worldview.
Explain that. Well,
God says, love me or go to hell, or love me and come to heaven. He gives us a reward and He gives us a threat, and that's where the love hangs in that balance. So I don't think we can truly love God, like you said.
No, it's a completely wrong comparison, because it's saying, because hell is not bad because we're like burning, right? And it's bad because it's separation from God.
Yeah, that's
God
still a
makes
bad thing. Yeah, that's still a bad
God
thing.
makes us.
Whatever doctrine of hell you hold, it's worse than the heaven thing. So there's a threat, right? There's a bad that you can
But we
experience.
chose the threat.
That's
We
fine.
chose it.
That's fine. So it's like you coming to me and saying, Joel, I love you, but if you don't love me back, you're going to choose to go into my basement and be tortured by demons.
You know, it's be with God. It's be with God. Choose to be with God or not be with God. And if you're choosing not to be with God, then you should have no problem not being with God and being in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hell.
So God is creating a torturous dichotomy. He's
That you
saying,
choose.
huh?
That you choose. So
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
the
yeah.
problem if you're choosing it? If you consent to it, then what's the problem?
It's the same thing. Like you have the pew pew to my head, and you go, you got to love me, or else I either blow your face off, or I'll give you $1 million every year. How are you supposed to trust this love from me? Like
No,
it is literally the same thing.
no. Explain to me how it's the same thing because it's very different. I'll explain to you how it's different, but
If you love him, and by the way, no one else is telling us about this. This is very important, Terry. No one else is mentioning this. There's not someone else like in a totally different book outside of the Bible going, by the way, there's this hell thing. You might want to avoid it. It's just Jesus and Paul and whatever. But Jesus is saying, guys, this is the deal. You either follow me or love me, whatever, and go to heaven. In my Father's house there are many mansions. I'm telling you about that. Or there is eternal damnation, burning and weeping and gnashing of teeth. I'm also telling you about that. And just because you have sort of like done the Christian thing, we're going like, it's your choice, man. It's just like whatever you choose. That doesn't change the fact that he's the one that's putting the gun to your head. Like he's the one that is telling you about either of those things and expecting you to make a choice with this very, very harsh dichotomy. So how is it not the same?
for one, right? God created it. When you take in consideration that God created everybody, right? Uh, when you're talking about like pew pew to your head, like me and you, that's completely different than God doing it because God created us. God created us with
It's
dignity.
really not completely different because
But are we
there's
God? Are you God? Am I God? Nobody.
no,
We're
but
not
it's
God.
the same thing. Love God or don't love God, there are two options. It's like you holding a pew pew to my head and saying like, if you don't love me, this gun goes off. It's your choice. Or you love me and I give you $1 million every year. I would go, yeah, give me the $1 million. I'll love you. Pretend to love you.
If you don't truly love God,
Well,
you're still.
I'm getting a reward. I'm obviously going to choose the reward. You can't
But if
trust
you don't
someone
truly
who's.
love,
How am I supposed to
yeah,
truly love the God? I've never met the guy. But anyway, the point is
it's
that
faith, obviously.
yeah, you have to
Even
pretend.
if you,
I get it. You have to pretend that he
in the con,
exists.
in the context of God, if you don't believe, if you can't pretend you believe in God, you're not going to actually go and get into heaven if you just pretend.
Right. But
So
Terry,
that's a
what you're doing is you're saying when you've got the gun to the head, God is going, you can choose that this gun won't go off, but it's your choice if it goes off. And I would go, I don't want it to go off. I choose that it don't go off, and I just walk away. And I just like go live in a third option. And he's like, no,
that option would be.
it's one or the other. Obviously the gun's going to go off and you can't not choose that. So that's the thing, Terry. It's one or the other. God is setting that dichotomy. It's all him. So it's exactly the same analogy.
Yeah, but I mean, if you really hate that aspect, then I mean, I'm sorry, but I think it's completely justified if, in the
You
context of
do?
God. I think it's justified if God made all of us and we sin, which is doing something bad, right? Obviously, sin is bad. We shouldn't be sinning. If we do sin and we don't believe that He actually made us, then what's wrong with Him sending us to hell? I mean, we chose that lifestyle. We chose that place.
I don't think there's any truth to what you're saying that that it would be loving or justified to burn someone or have them suffer for eternity for not believing you exist, which is essentially what it is, right? Because he could do, by the way, Terry, just think about this, use your imagination. He could do infinite options, like literally infinite options. So we could have heaven, reward. You got it right. You guessed right. I am the God. Hell, Hitler, right? And then everything in the middle for all sorts of different people that just don't believe, but they're lovely people who were Muslims, but they were like the good kind of Muslim that's just like wants to help people and whatever. And then like Hindus and all these other people that like tried their best, were really, really great people. And they just didn't get God. They didn't understand that God exists. They didn't believe in the Jesus thing, even though they heard about it. And that would be, I think, more just, more loving. So the dichotomy, I think, fails.
I mean, that's what you think, but why do you think your opinion is more than of God's if he hypothetically exists?
I just think that it seems to make sense when we think about the words like good and loving and stuff like that. But you actually like it, so you're a different character. You're so indoctrinated that you actually think that like it's a good thing to punish people for infinity, for like eternity, for not believing there's enough evidence to believe in a particular God. You really think that?
Yes. I mean, if you choose not to, then yeah, it's your choice.
It's not a choice. Okay, let's do that then. So this is where it falls apart for me. And really pay attention to this. This is really big. This is a huge, huge point that like if you really are honest with this, it will hopefully destroy the cult. Break the indoctrination for you and get you out of that cult. That's what I'm hoping for, Terry. Belief is not a choice. I am not choosing to reject Jesus Christ. I just don't believe he exists or is God.
And that is a choice.
That's not a choice.
You're choosing to not believe.
I'm not choosing that. I'm not convinced.
So in any sort of way you would never believe. So it's 100%.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. If somebody could convince me, then I could be convinced. I'm not saying like I will forever not believe. I don't believe because I'm not convinced of it. So you and Terry, you do believe because you're convinced of it. You are not making a choice to believe right now. So what we're going to talk about is the question between us is belief a choice? You believe that belief is a choice, and I believe that belief is not a choice.
Okay, why didn't you think belief is a choice? Because obviously you're believing to choose. See, because on one hand, you look at me, I believe. On the other hand, you do not believe. So there's obviously two outcomes, and that somebody will choose between the two outcomes.
It's not a choice. It's you're convinced of it or you're not convinced. So I used to believe. I was raised in Christianity. I was indoctrinated into it at a very young age. I became a Christian at 5 years old, if you can believe it. So I was convinced by someone, my parents and people around me that I thought cared about me, who probably did care about me, to be honest. They told me this thing, and they convinced me that it was true. So I bought it. But as I got older and started thinking about it clearly, I began to understand that it doesn't make sense. So now I'm convinced that it's not true. But I'm not choosing to believe that it's not true. I'm convinced. I'm convinced it's not true.
So you think you're either convinced or you choose? You don't think you're choosing because you're convinced?
No, you're convinced or you're not convinced.
Terry,
You think there's influence, but it's not. There's no choice here. So basically, what you're saying, if you can choose your belief, you can choose to believe something you don't believe. That doesn't sound right, does it?
What do you mean?
Well, just listen to the sentence. Do you think you can choose to believe something you don't believe?
Of course not, but it's still a choice.
How?
Because so you have two options, and if I choose not to, if it's two options, then it's either a choice between the two.
It's not a choice. It's not a choice. First of all, yeah, I get it. There's two options: belief or not belief.
And you choose between the two.
There's not a choice there. It's either you're convinced of one thing or the other. And you can do this for everything. You're just thinking that it's a choice because of the magic part, right? But let's think about like flat earth or globe earth, right? There's two choices. You believe the earth is flat or you don't believe the earth is flat. Same thing. Do you believe the earth is flat because you choose to believe that the earth is flat or because you're convinced that the earth is flat? What would you say?
I'm choosing that I believe the Earth is round based on my evidence that I.
Because you're convinced.
Yes.
Yep.
But I'm still choosing based on me getting convinced.
There's no the choice would have to look like this. Oh yeah, I see all the evidence that the Earth is round, but I'm going to choose to believe that it's flat, even though I believe that it is round. I'm convinced it's round, but I'm still going to believe it's flat. You can't do that. Because you're convinced that it's round. You couldn't like choose to believe something you don't believe. Like, are you hearing this?
I hear that part, but it doesn't, just because you are convinced that you don't believe in something. So you're saying, but what happens then if you decide to later on believe and you got evidence and that you got the idea that God exists?
You don't decide, but you can be convinced with new information.
So what would you call that if you are now convinced with new information? So you were an unbeliever, now you're a believer. What is that? You're making a different choice. You are changing.
No, you are being convinced of the new information. Somebody has convinced you. Someone has done an argument or something that makes you go, I never thought of it that way. I now believe that God exists because someone ran the tag argument and it was so convincing.
Yeah, I don't know why you believe that you can't choose something because you're convinced. I don't know why you think that you can't be convinced and choose something at the same time. You differentiate.
So maybe you're getting caught up with like, you believe that Jesus exists, right? You believe that Jesus existed, was the Son of God, died for your sins. You believe you're a sinner, you need redemption, and there's heaven and hell. You believe those things because you've been convinced of them, right?
Yes, and I'm choosing my faith.
You're choosing to follow them. You're choosing to submit to it. So you're saying, I know that God exists. I believe that God exists. I've been convinced of that. I didn't choose that. I was convinced of that. But I'm going to choose to give my life to Christ. I'm going to choose to try to follow the rules, and I'm going to choose to pray and go to church and all those things. So maybe those are two different ideas. The reason why I'm not going to choose to do the stuff is because I'm not convinced that the God is real, right? If I could be convinced that the God is real, then I might choose the God, right? I probably would, because I want to get the heaven thing and out of the fear of hell thing. So that's all it is. So Terry, a great way to do this, and if you're really honest with yourself, and there's no reason not to be, you believe that God exists. You're convinced of that. So all you have to do to prove this, that belief is a choice, is just to like choose to believe God doesn't exist for like 20 minutes or something. Think you could do that?
If I was, if somebody tried to change my mind, somebody convinced me.
No. Belief is a choice, remember? So you have to just like choose to believe
that choice. And I can change that choice based on somebody convincing.
That's not, see, this is where I think you're getting it. Like, I think you're sort of getting it because you're being funny with the words. But you get what I'm saying is you need to be convinced.
Exactly.
There's no actual choice there. That's a bit of a
choice. The choice is based on your evidence and whatever's convincing you to believe in that choice. And convincing just influences your choice. Influence and evidence and being convinced is just.
This is the deal. It's like you're convinced of it or you're not. There's nothing like I'm just gonna make the choice. Like, I don't even think that like, if you had two very compelling things and you just like arbitrarily chose one, like I can't even get my head around that. I think it's like you're just like convinced a little bit more of one thing than another thing. So in your case, you're probably like fully convinced. Like all you have to do, like for instance, you believe in Yahweh and God and Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try this again. So just switch that up and just like believe in Allah for like a week. Just choose to believe Allah is the one true God, and then you can, after a week, choose to believe that Yahweh is the one true God again. Can you do that, you think?
If somebody gave me the right evidence and convinced me.
Exactly, Terry. You have to be convinced. So I think we've established that you can't choose what you believe. You have to be convinced, correct?
Yeah, you have to be convinced.
You have to be convinced, and then you can choose to follow the thing. I agree that you can choose to follow the thing, but you can't choose to follow the thing if you don't believe that it exists.
And whose fault is it if you're not convinced or not?
I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's probably the fault of the God, but like I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame me. We're just not convinced of it. That's not our fault. We haven't been presented with enough evidence.
You don't choose to be convinced of these things. Like you don't choose. Like if you
you don't choose to be convinced, Terry.
You don't think you get choose to be convinced?
You know you don't.
So like you think if you genuinely like tried, and I think that's where faith comes into play, because then it comes down to faith. If you know
what are you talking about?
I'm saying that
you're convinced. I bet you somebody scared you. Like you're convinced because of fear. Somebody convinced you that you need to believe in this one particular God, or you're going to go to a hell, or you get to go to a heaven. You're convinced of it, and you're worried that if you don't do it the right way, there's trouble. I think that that's probably what it is. So you're sitting here convinced. I'm not convinced. I used to be convinced. I was a child like you, and I stopped being convinced. And that's it. There's no like choosing what convinces me or anything like that. I'm not being willfully blind. All right? I'm either convinced or I'm not convinced. And please, like, stop lying to yourself. The whole point of this, and I'll like put a button on it and then we can call it a day, is that if I don't choose what I believe, and I don't, if I don't choose what convinces me, and I don't, if it's just a matter of being convinced by the data or not, then me burning in hell for eternity for believing or not believing for not believing is not just, and it's not loving, because I had nothing to do with it.
You had the opportunity to believe, and you chose not to, because you were not convinced.
How do I choose not to if I'm not convinced, Terry? Are you listening, or are you just not being honest with me? If you can get your head around that, maybe you can learn that like we don't choose our beliefs, so punishing people for something that they couldn't choose is not just.